This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Been a long education.
Yeah, you know, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
Welcome to it. It is Tuesday, my friends. Welcome to the Steve Gruber Show. If you're just plugging in for the day, terrorist attacks rock Brussels, Belgium. Terrorist attacks rock Brussels, Belgium, just a couple of days after the leader of the Paris attacks is taken into custody in that country. At least 13 people are dead, dozens of others injured after explosions rocked the airport there, the subway system. Like I said, just days after the key suspect in the Paris attacks from November was apprehended in the city. Authorities are not saying that it is a terror attack. I am. I'll take that risk. Belgium's interior minister announcing that the terror threat was being raised to the maximum level, flights being canceled, arriving planes being diverted, all public transportation in Brussels shut down. Security also tightened at all Paris airports. At least 13 dead at the last count. A spokesman at the airport in Brussels confirms that the blast occurred shortly after 8 a.m. local time. That would have been about 3 in the morning Eastern time. Reuters, citing the Belga news agency, reported that shots were also fired and shouting in Arabic. Shouting in Arabic was heard before the explosions. Zach Bouzoun, who arrived on a flight from Geneva about 10 minutes before the first blast, told local television crews that the second louder explosion brought down ceilings, ruptured pipes, mixed water with the blood of the victims. It was atrocious, he reported. Blood everywhere. Injured people everywhere. Debris in bags. Like a war scene, he said, because, well, my friends, it is a war scene. This is what we're dealing with. It hasn't gotten better since yesterday, and it won't get better tomorrow. And the United States does not lead from behind to take care of it. Our passive approach to world terrorism is not correcting the problem. Not here, not in Europe, not in the Middle East, not anywhere. About 80 minutes after the airport blast, an explosion was reported at the Maelbeek subway station, not far from the headquarters, by the way, of the European Union. These are the folks that are being shamed into taking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of refugees from the Middle East with little or no background checks, little or no control in many circumstances. As these refugees flood into Europe, overwhelming communities, overwhelming the government, overwhelming the resources available, setting up their own communities, if you will, with no respect for the countries that they have, in fact, invaded. The explosion at the airport hit in the middle of the busiest time there, by the way. Smoke was seen billowing from the terminal, while other images showed security officers patrolling inside the halls with blasted panels and ceiling insulation. Members of the Belgian parliament told the local news the wounded were struck by flying glass, ceiling tiles, and other debris. Amateur video shows passengers, including a child, running with a backpack, dashing out of the terminal, different directions. It's typical. With 3 runways in the shape of a Z, the airport connects Europe's capital to 226 destinations around the world, handles 23.5 million passengers in 2015. That has come to an end today. So terrorism is the biggest threat. So here's the question again, my friends. Are you safer than you were 4 years ago? Has Barack Obama been able to lead from behind effectively, in your estimation? We'll take a closer look at that on today's program. Also today, the Lieutenant Governor, Brian Calley, will be joining me to discuss Governor Snyder's new 75-point plan to tackle what's going on with the Flint water situation. The governor yesterday releasing a 75-point plan. We'll have that. And then, much closer to home, we're going to take a closer look at the State Board of Education considering a policy on LGBT students, but apparently it's LGBTQI or something now. And I'll give you a taste of this one. Lesbian, gay, and bisexual students are more than 2 times as likely as their peers, according to a published report in the Free Press from Detroit, to be threatened with a weapon at school or skip school because they feel unsafe. Those statistics provided the backdrop as the State School Board of Education began to discuss a new set of policies aimed at ensuring those students, along with students who are transgender or questioning their identity or whatever they may be doing, are treated fairly in school. In fact, now there's a whole list of guidelines. Here's what is being put forward by the State Board of Education for you to consider. And we'll be talking about this today at 888-900-9966. Adopt and enforce policies that protect students from harassment, violence, and discrimination based on their sexual orientation, gender identity, and or gender expression. Provide professional development opportunities on issues affecting LGBTQ students to all district staff and school board members. Support the creation of extracurricular student-led clubs, such as gay, straight alliances or gender or sexuality alliances in the middle and high school. Provide appropriate and meaningful family engagement and support. Encourage respect for the human and civil rights of all people, including those who are LGBTQ, throughout the curriculum. But here's where it gets really problematic. School staff should address students by their chosen name and pronouns that correspond to their gender identity, whether or not there has been a legal name change. When requested, schools should make a good faith effort to change unofficial student records with a chosen name and appropriate gender markers to promote consistency among teachers, substitute teachers, school administrators, and other staff. Students should be allowed to use the restroom that corresponds to their gender identity, and alternative options such as an all-gender or single-user restroom should also be made available. A student should not be forced to use a locker room that is aligned with their gender identity. Locker room usage should be determined on a case-by-case basis. Oh, and by the way, the school says that they should make this determination, not the parents, nor physicians, nor mental health professionals. No, the school should make this entire determination based on the... and there's no age limitation here either. Apparently, if you're in first grade and decide you want to go in the girls' bathroom and you're a boy, schools encourage that. It's the Steve Gruber Show. Welcome to it.
Michigan, born and raised with Midwestern values and Michigan common sense.
By the way, this position paper, this policy statement, I guess, from the State Board of Education, the state superintendent of schools, comment is open until May. So the comment period is now open. Just for the record, the comment period here on the Steve Gruber Show is open Monday through Friday from 6 to 9. It's a free speech zone. This is not a safe space at all. The number is 888-900-9966. David on the line in Grand Rapids. Dave, welcome aboard.
Hey, if you're going to keep reading the article, it's pretty interesting to keep reading because it puts undue stress on the teachers who have to deal with Jane as Jack during school, but then if they would ever have to talk to the parents, they would have to refer to the legal name to the parents. So the parents or the school teachers have to deal with all the mess. But secondly, in my opinion, is what happens to gender equity in school sports.
There isn't any.
How soon until right?
There isn't any. Here's the thing, Dave. You hit a very good point here. That's a very good point, because here's the deal. On school sports, it says they have to be able to do whatever activities they want based on their gender identity, whatever that means. So I guess if a boy is cut from the boys' basketball team, as an example, and he decides, well, I still want to play basketball, so he can go right over and try out for the girls' basketball team. He says, I identify as a girl. What are you going to do about it? I mean, this gobbledygook, this nonsense, this garbage, just opens up the Pandora's box of stupidity in many ways. Now, if there are students that need, legitimate help and so on and so forth, let's get that for them. Let's protect them. I agree with respecting people, and, we don't want them being abused or bullied. I get that. That part I agree with. But let's apply some common sense. We can't turn the entire school upside down because, one kid wants to, dress as a different gender and use a different restroom and do different things. Get a gender-neutral, single stall bathroom, fine. Put that in there. Most schools have that now for handicap access, but stop the nonsense.
More policy is more bullying. You can't wear this shirt, but you can do this what you want to do.
Well, and the other part that's really damaging here, David, is the fact that they're taking power away from the parents. You as a parent, if your 6-year-old goes to school and declares that, I feel like a little girl today, I mean, what, you're going to respect that? That's just, it's silliness. Dave, thanks for checking in. And we're going to keep this conversation going coming up here later on the program. It's absurd what's being put forth here. Absolutely absurd, make no mistake. And we're going to talk about more here coming up in hour number 2 on the program. Let's see. Let's take Steve real quickly before we get to that, though. Steve, you're on the line. Let's do it.
Is this the Michigan Board of Education?
That's what it says.
Science fiction is coming from?
Yeah, this is coming from, and there are numerous articles. We caught this yesterday. This has been going on for a few days.
I'm sick and tired of this crap. And here's the deal. We pay some of the highest dollars around the world for education. We rank as some of the lowest. If you come forward from like 1975 forward, and you look at the number of kids who are college ready, the number has only gone down as pay for teachers has gone up, along with their health care benefits and other such fringes.
Here, let me read this to you. Yeah, I agree with you. Let me read this to you. This is from the Detroit Free Press. Kim Phillips-Nope, a special projects consultant for the Michigan Department of Education, said she has been working since December with a diverse group that includes parents, students, teachers, and lawyers. Let's keep that one in mind. Lawyers, to develop the guidelines in a related position statement. Phillips-Nope said school districts have been increasingly seeking guidance from the state, particularly when it comes to the best ways of supporting transgender students. There you have it, Stevie. And it's out there all over the place. Articles all over. This is from the... What's that?
Oh, how nice. Thank you very much for sharing.
No problem.
At some point, when Donald Trump becomes president, maybe we can get this crap straightened out once and for all. Political correctness has got to go.
On that point, I agree with you, and I appreciate you calling in. The phone number here, 888-900-9966, 888-900-9966. Speaking of national politics, I want to make sure I get this in before I run out of time. But Bill Clinton is he's not playing nice with the folks, not playing nice with the folks at all. In fact, Bill Clinton ramping up his attacks on President Obama during a speech yesterday in Spokane, Washington. You have to listen to what he says to really appreciate it. Clip 1, go.
I literally, from the time I met her 45 years ago till we talked yesterday, she is the best change maker I have ever known. She always finds a way to make something good happen, to make people feel empowered, to buy people into the process, to make democracy work the way the framers intended for it to work. Now, if you don't believe we can all grow together again, if you don't believe we're ever going to grow again, if you believe it's more important to relitigate the past, there may be many reasons that you don't want to support her. But if you believe we can all rise together, if you believe we've finally come to the point where we can put the awful legacy of the last 8 years behind us and the 7 years before that when we were practicing trickle-down economics and no regulation in Washington, which is what caused the crash, then you should vote for her. because she's the only person who basically has good ideas, will tell you how she's going to pay for them, can be commander-in-chief, and is a proven change maker with Republicans and Democrats and independents alike.
The awful legacy of the last 8 years and the 7 years before that, the awful legacy, says Bill Clinton. Now, he came out swinging at Barack Obama. The awful legacy of Barack Obama is what he's saying, and there's no parsed language there. The question is Bill becoming unglued, or does Bill have some insight on what may be going on with the FBI investigation into his wife? It would make you wonder, because that's awfully strong language in an election year to attack the guy who his wife is in effect running for the third term. Hillary Clinton's running for Barack Obama's third term in effect, and here comes Bill Clinton, as the wrecking crew, the one-man wrecking crew coming through. There's something for you to think about. All right, let's take a break. We'll be right back on the Steve Gruber Show.
The Steve Gruber Show, American values with Midwestern common sense.
All right, welcome back to it on a Tuesday. Listen, we're going to get back to the terrorist attack in Brussels. We'll have more on Donald Trump going to Washington, laying out his foreign policy team, which, by the way, is pretty impressive. And we'll talk about that. We'll get back to the LGBTQ statements by the State Board of Education. And we'll get back to Bill Clinton slamming Barack Obama on the campaign trail. I mean, there's a lot to cover any given day here. And trust me, we should probably expand the show to about 6 or 8 hours so we could try to get it all in. Ivy just gave me a look for that, by the way. She thinks that's a really bad idea. Because there are other things to consider any given day, like how are you going to pay your bills? How is Obamacare affecting you? What's your premium going to look like this year, and so on and so forth. Kevin McKechnie is my next guest, the executive director of the Health Savings Account Council and the American Bankers Association's Office of Insurance Advocacy. Kevin McKechnie, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
Well, glad to have you here. I mean, obviously, I'm one of the lucky folks. I've had my insurance canceled twice since Obamacare came along. I didn't get to keep my doctor or my insurance or much of anything, and I've lost it twice now. Well, the second time around was through one of the beautiful co-ops created by the federal government and then destroyed by the federal government. We actually liked it, by the way. It was the only co-op in Michigan. It came. It was wonderful. It went away, and so now I'm without. But what do you see, Kevin, on the horizon? I'm seeing people with 30 and 40% premium increases this year. Just sum it up for me, Obamacare, on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being great, 1 being the worst.
Unfortunately, there's not a rating below that, and that's not ideology. The problem is that, as you described, the federal government is exactly the wrong institution, not an insurance company. And what they tried to do, if you only got 30 to 40% increases, count yourself among the lucky. Lots of people experiencing rate increases far in excess of that. And it's because the mandates in the law require insurance to be something it isn't, which is essentially a payment plan. That's why it's so expensive. Imagine trying to insure brake jobs, oil changes, windshield wiper repair. If you tried to do that, your auto insurance would be several times what it costs right now. And that's where we are with the Affordable Care Act.
So let me focus on this health savings account and health savings account qualified plans. As we know, anybody who's paid much attention, those that had Cadillac plans, like unions, for example, that were heavily vested in the Democratic Party and were laden with Democratic voters, they got all sorts of breaks. They didn't have to pay the taxes and the penalties and so forth that the rest of us did. But some of that is going away now, and some of that is going to come back to haunt these folks now. What's changing? What's the difference now?
Right now, our problem, cumulatively, as Americans, is the full force of the law is now coming into effect. You mentioned the Cadillac plans. There's actually something called the Cadillac tax, which Senator Hatch and Senator Rubio and Representative Paulson are trying to repeal. Almost unanimity of opinion that that tax should be repealed. The tax is a 40-cent excise tax on what we're supposed to be a very few very rich plans. And it turns out to be more like a Chevy tax. Almost everybody's going to have to pay it. And so it's ironic in the sense that both Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders want to repeal this. The unions are very adamant that this be repealed. In fact, the change to health savings account qualified plans among union members is largely fueled by the fact that the Affordable Care Act Cadillac tax hits them the hardest. And so that's the one thing that's coming, I think, and that's almost the end of the Affordable Care Act, if in fact that revenue raiser is repealed.
Well, and that brings you back to the folks that say they want to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare altogether. Let's be honest. What has it done for anybody? Has it created better health care? No. Has it created savings? Pretty much not. Has it created more people insured? There are more people uninsured today than when they started the whole process, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, where has the Affordable Care Act done anything of any value?
You know, I can point to just a couple of things, but your summary is completely accurate. It's not affordable. It's called the Affordable Care Act. It's not available. You yourself have lost it twice. What it really did is it addressed a very small segment of American society that didn't need this. It needed a simple adjustment. They were called the HIPAA high-risk pools, and that was a feature of a 1990s law that was designed to address people with chronic care. And the way that the Affordable Care Act did that is it essentially started paying their bills, and it removed from everybody else medical underwriting. So you're no longer underwritten, which is why it's now so expensive. Those things were largely popular, but the pricing, the fact that you can't get it anymore, and the fact that, as you pointed out, the co-ops and the exchanges are now in financial collapse, means that the audience for which it was intended is now left to the winds again.
Yeah, once again, Kevin McKechnie on the line, the Executive Director of the Health Savings Account Council and the American Bankers Association's Office of Insurance Advocacy. Kevin, wouldn't it have been cheaper and smarter? Okay, let's make a premise here that we as a country want to make sure that everybody has a baseline of insurance. That's been discussed in this country since Teddy Roosevelt was president. All right, fair enough. Wouldn't it have been cheaper and more effective to say, listen, we've got 12 million people that are uninsured. Let's get them some baseline of insurance coverage. And if we're going to pay for it, okay, we're going to pay for it. A lot of people would have complained, but it would have been significantly cheaper than this disaster that was unleashed on the American people.
No question about it. One of the reasons is the huge expansion of bureaucracy required to administer this law. There's about 20,000 new people in Washington, which is why the housing crisis never seems to touch the Beltway, because you just keep adding federal employees required to manage all of the new things to which we're supposed to be entitled, for which the price is absolutely unattainable. That's the challenge. That's the problem. Will it be repealed is a question you asked that I think bears some discussion. Unfortunately, I'm here to tell your audience there's some bad news there. It's almost politically impossible to do it, not because there's no will, but because of the structure of our government suggests that at this time we've got a Congress in the hands of Republicans who are willing to repeal it and a president who's unwilling to sign it. But next year we may have a president willing to repeal it and a Congress unwilling to repeal it. And so we'll have to see what comes over the horizon. But right now, we're going to have to live with this thing. And I think you can expect some tweaks on the horizon. There's certainly nothing major.
Yeah, tweaks. Yeah, let's tweak a piece of garbage. You know, it's a Frankenstein creation to begin with. It got exactly zero Republican support, no bipartisan. It was put through on parliamentary tricks to get it through in the first place, and it's turned into be just an absolute disaster. Kevin, I'll give you 20 seconds for the last word.
You put your finger right on it. There is no bipartisan support for the bill. In fact, the repeal bill in the House of Representatives had more bipartisan support than the vote to pass the bill. That's the problem. Our country doesn't do well with one-sided political bills. We need something better. And I appreciate being able to come on and talk about health savings accounts this morning. Thanks, Steve.
Well, Kevin, I look forward to having you back again because you're very well versed and you bring a lot of knowledge to the conversation, which is helpful to me and, of course, to the listeners. Kevin, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Kevin McKechnie, Executive Director of the Health Savings Account Council and the American Bankers Association's office. When we come back, we're going to talk about protecting your Second Amendment rights before we get back to that big State Board of Education conversation right here on the Steve Gruber Show.
Genuine Michigan common sense on display every day.
In a white room with black.
All right, welcome back to it. The hotline number is 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. Anywhere that you can get through, we'll take your phone call and put you on, including California, where Dave is calling in. Dave, welcome to the program.
Hey, how are you, Steve? You know, I'm a big single-payer advocate, and, you know, that's...
Well, of course you are, Dave. You're a Democrat. Go on.
Well, actually, a whole lot of Republicans like single-payer, too, because it's not only cheaper, but you get better quality care.
No, you don't, Dave. Go to the Veterans Administration, Dave. You're wrong again. Go on.
Well, if the VA is being sabotaged, then maybe the vets ought to get up off their butts and stop it.
Gee, what I'm telling you, Dave, is single-payer systems are an abject failure my entire life. 50 years on the planet. The VA is a great example of a single-payer system, Dave. Go on.
Let me get this right. The guy you just interviewed is from the American Banking Association, and he wants to kill Obamacare? I mean,
dude, Obamacare killed itself. Dave, you've already showed yourself for what you are. Dave, listen. Single-payer systems are a failure in Canada, the UK, France, and pretty much everywhere. But I appreciate you calling in for a single-payer system, and of course you support that, Dave. You're a Democrat. What would we want? We'd expect nothing else. But I do appreciate you listening every day in California. You're getting up early, and you know it'll wash off on you at some point. Common sense will overtake you. I guarantee it. It is Tuesday here on the program. You can check in as well. 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. Please be more prepared than Dave. Please. Are we ready to go on the next guest, Alex? All right, then. Our good friend John Lott is here, the president of the Crime Prevention Research Center. Doctor, welcome back.
Well, great to talk to you again.
Here's my question for you, because I've been ruminating over this since Barack Obama put up his nomination for a Supreme Court justice, a man who is clearly against the Second Amendment based on some previous rulings and so forth. What will happen to people in places like Michigan and Ohio and where else around the country people have concealed pistol licenses and so forth? Will federal law, if, let's say for the sake of argument, another case gets in front of the Supreme Court and the individual right to carry concealed for personal protection and so forth, the individual right is determined to not be an individual right, but a collective right, and therefore is overturned. What will it mean to the millions of people in America that have the right to carry a concealed weapon?
Well, I think it's going to depend upon the state. At least initially, I don't think there'll be any federal push successfully on that. But you have court cases in a number of states. In Washington, D.C., a court case just forced them to begin to issue some permits. They've still only issued permits to 45 people. But before that, it was zero. In California, there's a case. In Hawaii, there's cases. They're going through the courts where the Circuit Court of Appeals said that you just can't require good reason for people to get a permit. It's been very difficult. You know, like in Los Angeles, you have 240 people in Los Angeles County with about over 8 million adults have a concealed carry permit. In those places, my guess is the permit rules may become even more restrictive. They could ban them, in theory, for people carrying, or surely not expand it. You may see D.C. go back to banning it again. And so, in Illinois, it might make a difference. Obviously, they were forced to as a result of a court decision, and something like that could be overturned. But I don't think anything's going to happen in Michigan or Indiana.
Well, I wonder, because Illinois is a good example, Doctor, because when you look at Illinois, when we leave the state of Michigan, basically to go any place west, we have to go through Illinois. You get on I-80 or 94, whichever highway you take towards Iowa or Montana, wherever you might be heading off to. You have to go through Illinois, which means you have to stop the car, put all the guns and so forth in the trunk or in locked cases, because Illinois does not recognize the carry laws from Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, any of these states. So I wonder, Illinois is already problematic to all the legal gun owners that are on the east side of that state headed west. And I wonder if the Supreme Court has the ability to strike down altogether these concealed carry permits. That's what I guess I'm driving at. Can they strike it down altogether, make the whole world Illinois?
Well, I don't think the court would be considering a case like that. You'd have to have some type of federal legislation, and that's just not on the horizon right now. What it is likely to do is make it so that states could be much more restrictive than they are right now in terms of the number of permits that they issue. And I think those are, in fact, the types of cases which are now headed to the Supreme Court and may be there in the next year or so. So, who replaces Scalia, who replaces Kennedy, will make a huge difference in how those cases turn out. I mean, those cases will be going to the Supreme Court. The question is, when will they be there?
Well, you mentioned Kennedy, but Thomas is also, he's up there in age too. The conservative side. Right.
He's a lot younger. I mean, he's been on for a long time, but I believe he's 67 right now. I don't have any indication that he's in poor health, but
I hope not.
Yeah. I mean, look, you had two cases where it was 5-4 votes. Very narrow, and it was on a very narrow question where it was, can government completely ban guns? And the court said, if the Second Amendment means anything, it means that the government cannot completely ban guns. Now, that doesn't mean that even if you had the court with the exact same members today making a decision on concealed carry, that you would win that. It just meant that you won by a 5-4 decision, the government couldn't completely ban guns.
It was very close, yeah.
You'd like to have a couple solid extra votes there in order to make sure you could win that. And so
it'd be nice.
There's a lot at stake there. And look, if you just replace Scalia and Kennedy with, people who strongly support the individual right for self-defense, you're just getting back to where you were at Heller.
Dr. John Lott, always a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy!
Education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
And welcome to it, my friends. It is Tuesday here on the program, if you're just plugging in for the day. Big terrorist attacks in Brussels, Belgium, early this morning, 8 o'clock local time. Attacks on the airport, attacks on the subway system. At least 13 people dead, many more injured. Clearly, a terrorist attack. They're not calling it that, but I will. Gunshots were heard. People running around screaming in Arabic heard as this attack, or these multiple attacks, were unfolding. Of course, this comes just days after one of the leaders of the attack on Paris last November was brought into custody, survived a gun battle with police in Belgium. And so this is the latest terrorist attack in Europe this year. And it makes you pause again to take a look at what's going on with the mass influx of refugees into that country, and what Europe is doing, to deal with this flood of refugees from the Middle East. They're showing up. They're not interested particularly in assimilating. They're just it's a free-for-all attack. on Europe. We'll, of course, keep you posted on that. Coming up a bit later on the program, Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley will be here to talk about Governor Snyder's 75-point plan. 75-point plan to correct the problems in Flint. We'll have that. But before we get to that is the report, position, policy paper from the State Board of Education and the superintendent of the State Board of Education, in effect, saying that we need to do everything we can for LGBTQ students, including calling them by whatever name they would like, with whatever pronoun they would like, and addressing them. And it doesn't matter what the age is, that they should be allowed to call themselves what they want, when they want, and the parents are basically excluded from the conversation. I found a letter from a parent that I want to read to you now. Sean Bertolino is the gentleman's name. He lives in Williamston. Good evening. The attached article, and he has an article of one of the many articles you can find on this topic now, was brought to my attention today. The reason for my email is to give this board an opportunity to possibly explain it and confirm or deny the allegations found within, whether they're true and accurate. If they are false, I would encourage a press release clarifying the issue and setting the record straight. This would head off any more rumors and gossip, as there is no mention of this on the board website. News, real or fake, can spread fast on social media and the internet, so it would be imperative this did not become a distraction. If they are true, I would be deeply troubled by it and would call for an immediate reversal of policy and opposition to the guidelines for the following reasons. 1, encouraging a type of self-identification that is not finalized nor authenticated by any type of medical or psychological science, let alone not requiring any, when it is in fact discouraged, would be irresponsible on the board's part and detrimental to the students, faculty, and staff of our schools. Gender identity is a rather new social issue we have come across in our society. We are still trying to fully understand homosexuality and those who adhere to the LGBTQ community. Moving forward with this new guidance under the banner of cultivating and sustaining caring, supportive, respectful, and affirming learning environments that provide for the education, safety, and welfare of all students seems to be contradictory, if not flatly incoherent, if we do not even have an accurate grasp on the topic at hand. 2, gender ideology causes great confusion with the student body as a whole. Being a teenager is difficult enough without a changing body, entering into adulthood and trying to find your place in the world. Restricting a self-evident understanding of male and female gender by students only serves to complicate this further. This would stem into confusing understanding of, but not limited to, sexual reproduction, sexual attraction, certain medical testing that requires the accurate sex of the individual, who to address one another, etc., and how to address one another. 3, I am deeply concerned about the bathroom locker room regulations this guidance proposes. As a father, I would not want my child in the same bathroom or locker room as the opposite sex, regardless of what the transgender or GNC child thinks of themselves, let alone having this encouraged by the school itself. It is my opinion that this sort of thinking defies logic and should be roundly dismissed. Even if the intentions are good, we are simply trading in the discomforts of one small group of people for the discomfort of the majority. That is simply not right. If anything, a transgender or GNC student should be given the option of utilizing a private faculty restroom or changing space, not a child who is not transgender or GNC. Finally, the biggest concern of mine is the willful neglect and subversion of the parents. Not having parents involved in their children's lives is the single biggest detrimental factor in academic and social success. Parents should be there for their children to guide, nurture, and lead them into adulthood. Striking parents from the equation only further adds to an uncertain future for their children. I constantly hear from educators that if parents would only be more involved in their child's lives, their scores would be higher. They would stay out of trouble, and they would learn to excel in all areas of life. This guidance seems to be encouraging the exact opposite, and it is shocking that it comes from our Michigan State Board of Education. Thank you for your time and consideration of my letter. I hope to have a better understanding of what the board has decided if the article proves to be true. I will expect an explanation soon, and no later than the end of the week. He hit on several things there that I think are important. The exclusion of parents from the conversation, extremely problematic. The fact that they will overturn the entire school district to accommodate a couple of people. That they will encourage administrators and teachers and faculty to call a student by whatever name they want and by whatever pronoun they want, and at any age, 6, 7, or 8. I suppose it could be a different conversation for high school students, but we're talking about kindergartners and elementary age kids. The Board of Education thinks that teachers should be required to call Billy and Susie by whatever name they think should be. Maybe it's unicorn and maybe it's rainbow or whatever it is. And that they should be identified with whatever gender they identify with. We've already gone through the absurdity on this program of some schools in England giving 20 and 30 and 40 different gender, possibilities. I'm sorry, let's stop the nonsense. Let's stop the political correct gobbledygook. Let's get back to educating our kids, not entertaining fantasies of children. It's 14 after on a Tuesday. It's the Steve Gruber Show. I'll be right back.
Keeping you in touch with Michigan and the world.
After on a Tuesday. Welcome back to the Steve Gruber Show. If you'd like to share your comments, your thoughts, 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. You can jump on board. Look forward to hearing from you. Shifting gears to something we haven't covered yet, and like I've said so many times, we should probably make the show 8 hours so we can get everything in. Still following the terrorist attack in Brussels at this hour. Many dead, many injured after attacks on the airport and the subway systems. It happened around 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock local time this morning, which would have been about 3 a.m. Eastern time. We'll keep an eye on that one. Meanwhile, the president traveled to Cuba, to embrace the legacy of Che Guevara, I guess, or to try to do something. I'm not sure what, but he got a total snub. Nobody of particular importance even met Air Force One when he landed in Cuba. The first time an American president, a sitting president, has been to Cuba since Calvin Coolidge in the 1920s. Dan Perkins is a domestic and foreign policy contributor to ReaganBaby.com, The Daily Surge, and The Hill. He joins us now with more. Dan, welcome to the program.
Good morning, and thanks for having me on again.
Glad to have you here. How embarrassing. You're touching the plane down. You think you're the trendy guy, you're the cool guy, you're the president of the United States, and you're hip, you're cool, and there's nobody there to see you. Nobody cares.
Yes, it's amazing that happened. If what I don't understand is why he didn't get on the plane and just turn around and come back. I mean, what a way to start, as you said, since Calvin Coolidge. What a way to start a new relationship, number one. Number two, it shows me that we're dealing with people who were not prepared for this to happen. And that they're rushing it because, if there was all this great demand and desire for the Cuban government to want to have normalizations of relations with Cuba, do you think that's the way they would act, that they wouldn't even set anybody of any magnitude to the airport to greet the president? It shows that our president is desperate to do anything to build his legacy, and they're not ready for him to come, and they're not ready to make any concessions to him at all. In fact,
Raul Castro sat there and ripped on America, and Obama took it. That's the other thing, I can agree with that. I can understand where you're coming from. Really? I'm looking forward to the day when we have an American president who stands up for America and says, I believe in America. I love America. We might have our shortcomings, but by God, we've done more good for this world than any other nation in the history of nations. That's what I look forward to, Dan.
Oh, I agree. But this has been the hallmark of his administration. You remember when he first came into office, he did his apology tour around the world, apologizing for America's greatness, and here we are coming up on the end of his term, and he's now still sitting there letting the world abuse him, and in turn abuse us as a nation. And I think it's just ludicrous.
I think it's absurd, and I'm surprised because I'm predicting for a very long time that Barack Obama would make his way to Cuba and offer Guantanamo Bay and the real estate thereof as a wedding present to the murderous Castro brothers and their murderous regime. And yesterday, Raul demanded it back. I'm surprised that the president didn't capitulate right there and say, hey, here you go. Here are the keys. See you later.
Well, theoretically, he can't do that. He needs the permission of the Congress to do that. But, our president doesn't pay much attention to Congress anymore. But maybe he's found that that's an area that's too sensitive, both for Democrats and Republicans alike, for him to summarily just write an executive order to turn it back. But if they were to turn it over to the Cubans, which I know that a lot of people, the president promised, if you remember, in his first election campaign, that was one of the things he was going to do, turn it over.
Did. Well, I got a question for you on a side note here while I'm thinking about it. What do you make of Bill Clinton yesterday in Washington just ripping on the awful legacy of the last 8 years, as he put it? Because, it was spectacular theater.
I watched the clip of that, and I have been saying I've been writing for the last week to 10 days that there's something going on with Hillary, but now I'm convinced that there's something going on with both of them. I don't know whether they're on they need their medications adjusted or something, but for Bill Clinton to stand up and basically say that the last 8 years have been a disaster.
Awful legacy. He peeled him. He peeled the Obama administration.
Yes, but if you think about it, listen to what Hillary is saying on the campaign trail. She's talking about all the problems that we have in this country and the things that they get done. But wait a minute, haven't you had control of the government for the last 8 years? So
yeah, absolutely. That's my point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So they've had control of the government for the last 8 years, and she's also now ripping on the Iran deal that she helped broker and put together. I mean, wait a second. It's like don't look over here. Don't remember what I did just recently. Forget about all that. Anyhow, it's crazy, Dan. I'll give you 30 seconds for the last word.
I think that what we're seeing is it's important also to look at what's going on in the media. The media is beginning to turn on her. I mean, if you think about if you saw the Face the Nation on Sunday, CBS News published the results of a CBS poll, and Hillary Clinton was, by one of the people in the audience, says she's lying about lying, and another one said, even if you turn the sound down and just watch her mouth move, you can tell her that she's lying. I was so shocked that CBS News would even do that. Remember when Clinton was the president? It was called the Clinton Broadcasting Network, not Columbia.
Exactly.
I just was amazed.
I got to run, Dan. Dan Perkins, everybody, here on the Steve Gruber Show. It's Tuesday. We'll be right back.
Getting your day started with news from around the state and around the world. Common Sense Radio. This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Welcome back to it. It is Tuesday here in the program. If you're just getting started with us today, at least 28 people now confirmed killed, dozens of others injured, many severely, some critical. Some critical after explosions rocked the Brussels airport and subway system early today. It happened around 8 o'clock in the morning local time, which would have been about 3 o'clock in the morning here in Michigan. The attacks came 4 days after the main suspect in the Paris attacks was arrested in Brussels. After his arrest, Salah Abdeslam told authorities he had created a new network and was planning new attacks. Well, apparently that's true. Belgian Prime Minister Charles Michel told a midday press conference What we feared has happened. A tragic moment, and we have to show calm and solidarity. Now, they were refusing to call this a terrorist attack, but witnesses on the scene of the attack at the airport said they heard yelling in Arabic before the explosions went. About an hour and a half later, just shy of that, 80 minutes later, another bomb went off on a subway train. Again, the latest death count, 28. Dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds more. You know, as these things go, the death toll and the injuries tend to mount as time passes. So we're keeping an eye on what's going on here. But make no mistake, the flood of refugees into Belgium, into Molenbeek, and other suburbs of Brussels, they've been flooded with these refugees from the Middle East. People not interested in becoming part of the Belgian culture, not interested in being part of the European culture, interested in setting up their own communities in their own communities, I suppose. And lashing out again. Another huge terrorist attack in the heart of Europe again. And you want to call those that feel we should reconsider how we allow refugees in from war-torn nations, you want to refer to us as Islamophobic or xenophobic or some other denigrating term. How about responsible? There's a term now. There's a term you could look at. Responsible for looking at what's happening. I will keep you up to date on what's happening in Belgium to the best of my ability here. But again, the latest death toll is 28, dozens more injured as we keep up with that story. Our next guest, Chad Livengood, is a political reporter for the Detroit News, has been with us many times in recent months, keeping us up to speed on important stories from around the state. And now a 10th death has been added to the Legionnaires' outbreak in Genesee County. Chad, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
So tell me about this 10th death and what the big news is here today.
Well, on Friday, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services confirmed that they had found a 10th person who had died from Legionnaire's disease, who was in Genesee County at the time of the water switch, when the city of Flint was using Flint River water, and during this spike from April of 2014 through October of last year. And they had originally said there was 9 deaths, but what they did was they went back and looked at all the deaths and cases of Legionnaire's disease statewide to try to see if anybody else was linked to Flint water or being in the Flint area at the time of the outbreak. And they found another person, they're not identifying them or their gender even, but someone that lives in Shiawassee County who was hospitalized in a Genesee County hospital.
So here's my question, Chad. You connected it back to a hospital there in Genesee County, because some of the reports that I've seen, and you've seen the same thing, obviously, you're on this story quite closely, seem to indicate that the connection was not necessarily to the water supply, at least not the Flint water supply, and the problem with contamination there that the governor's been under fire for, but something different, a water supply potentially at a local healthcare facility.
Well, the majority of these people were in a hospital in Flint, in the city of Flint, but the about a third of them did not either live in Flint or were hospitalized in a Flint hospital. So they lived elsewhere in Genesee County, which that's what baffles the investigators here. That's why they cannot prove definitively that it is the river water that caused this bacteria, this Legionella bacteria, to grow in the water, and this bacteria grows in large plumbing systems. So that's why its outbreak has mostly been in the hospitals, because they have these large cooling towers and long systems.
Closed systems. They have
plumbing,
closed, closed plumbing. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it takes 77 degrees for this bacterium to really take off and flourish. So, I mean, there has to be a place where it gets at, that optimum conditions, if you will, which happens in these closed plumbing systems, right?
Yeah, but this is obviously this is a part of the Flint water crisis storyline because one, it was this unusual spike that Genesee County used to get 4 to 6 cases a month a year, and now they had this huge spike of 88 over a period of less than 2 years, and so everyone's got their eye on this, and also, frankly, people died here, and the biggest outrage that has come out of this and scrutiny that is coming out of this state government is that nobody informed the public of this outbreak at any period of time. And there's lots of documentation and emails that show they were talking about it, informing the public. And something happened. And around March of last year, after the first wave of this had subsided, there was all this back and forth internal discussion between people at the EPA, the Department of Environmental Quality, the Department of Community Health, the Genesee County Health Department. All these, the CDC was involved. All these government agencies were talking about this, and no one actually went public with it. And why this 10th death is relevant is it occurred in August of last year. And along with 4 other people who died last summer.
So therefore it came much later.
It was part of the second wave of Legionnaire disease. It came back in June of last year, and 44 some odd people contracted the disease, and 5 more people died. And that's part of the scrutiny here is why did the government agencies not alert the public? They didn't even alert most medical practitioners. They didn't put it out on the general server for all Genesee County doctors to be alert,
to be on the lookout for this problem, or statewide for that matter. Anybody that's been in Flint, if you have a patient that arrives presenting these symptoms anywhere statewide, you might want to have people informed. Good stuff, Chad. I greatly appreciate that. Now, where can people find the articles and the story that you continue to follow?
At DetroitNews.com, we have a section called Flint Water Crisis under our news section. You can follow all of our continuing coverage of this story there.
All right, Chad Livengood, thanks for the update.
Thanks for having me.
There you have it. Chad Livengood from the Detroit News. They've added a 10th death now to the Legionnaires' outbreak in Genesee County. Straight ahead this morning, Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley will talk about the Flint water crisis and a new 75-point plan put forth to clean things up. It's all straight ahead.
Michigan, born and raised with Midwestern values and Michigan common sense.
All right, and welcome back. As we were just talking about new issues surrounding the Flint water situation with another death contributed to the Legionnaires' disease outbreak there. But the governor has put forth now a 75-point plan. You may have heard a bit about it, but here to help fill in the blanks and tell us exactly what's going on is the Lieutenant Governor, Brian Calley. Lieutenant Governor, welcome back to the program.
Great to be on the show. Thanks for having me again.
Very proactive, the governor is on this new plan, it seems. Don't get me wrong, it will probably not discourage much of the criticism of how things have been handled heretofore, but tell us about the 75-point plan and some of the things that the state believes it can do to rectify this ongoing problem.
Well, of course, at the center of all of it is the water supply and water infrastructure, which is the thing that gets covered most. But what I'm really excited about is the intermediate and the longer term things that can really help the community in ways that it needed even before the water crisis came. Things like early on services and highest quality preschool across the board for kids in Flint, and then the things like school nurses, up 9 school nurses that we've made appropriations for, and I think 5 have already been hired. The and then in the healthcare system as well, to make sure that the short and the long term needs for dealing with interactions and contamination with lead, that all of that is handled. But in the long term, to sustain any of this, jobs and economic development, and there's a really intense focus that has already started on trying to create a better, more sustainable future, so that people in Flint can really chart their own course, and that in order for that to be the case in the long term, we really need jobs. So this is across the board, starting with infrastructure, but all the way through to long-term security of the community through jobs and economic development.
What is the cost of this plan?
There are several aspects of it in terms of what we have identified. The needs right now is about $235 million. We know that there's going to be additional infrastructure needs over time, and there are also in the long term that the early childhood education, for example, will require money on an ongoing basis.
Now, hold on right there. Hold on. Here's my concern. We're on the line with Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley. Here's my concern, and the concern of a whole host of people listening, I can assure you. If you put $235 million into Flint, plus additional costs, and early childhood education, and all these other things, they're all nice, and I get that. What about all the other communities in the state that have high lead issues? Muskegon, Kalamazoo, Owasso, Ionia. I could go on. There's a very long list of lead contamination issues across the state of Michigan. Where are they going to line up for their $235 million or $400 million or $500 million? The fact of the matter is, we don't have that kind of money. And so why are all of these resources being dedicated to a single place?
Well, we are going to need to make changes across the board in the way that we mitigate and eventually eradicate the risk of lead. Every community in the country, not just in our state, is going to have to really. This is a wake up call to everybody with respect to the lead contamination issues. So, I think that in many cases where they have lead in their infrastructure, that there is, they still have the coating and they didn't change their water systems, and so there can be a plan put in place that doesn't result in an immediate spike in lead contamination like what we had in Flint. And so it needs to change everywhere, but in Flint is where you had the coating come off the pipes and you had a lead contamination issue.
And let me jump right in there and ask you this. Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley, didn't the water department of the city of Flint, having gotten the decision from the local community to make the change, didn't they violate federal law by not putting anti-corrosives in the water? Didn't they violate federal law by not having a written plan on how to deal with anti-corrosives in the water? Didn't the city of Flint water department make these egregious errors to begin with?
Yeah, there were errors at the local level, clearly, with the decision not to add corrosion control. But the DEQ should have made them after that, and the EPA should have made them after that. I mean, there was a failure at all three levels, and so I wouldn't want to discount the importance of the failures that were made at any of the levels. And so this is clearly something that needs to be a not just a wake up call, but a call to action. Across communities to say that this type of thing, that just because it happens under the surface, just because it's something that's under the ground, doesn't mean that it's not real. And I do appreciate that. Now
let me ask you this: how many of these young people, how many of these children in Flint, have been tested to date with elevated lead levels in their blood?
I don't have the numbers right at my fingertips, but I think that it's. I'd have to get them to you. I'd hate to even guess what that number is off the top of my head.
Right.
But,
last I heard, it was about 100, and not discounting that at all. I could not even imagine being one of those parents. But as you look around the state, again, Kalamazoo or Muskegon or Saginaw or other cities that have lead contamination issues, dedicating hundreds of millions of dollars to one city. Seems like it could be problematic financially going forward. That's what I'm asking here. I'll give you 30 seconds for the last word, sir.
I understand that totally. But one thing that as I evaluated it, and we don't have any way of knowing today who had contact with lead a year ago, but because it doesn't show up in their lead still, but in their blood still. But what we do know is that things like early childhood education and early on screening and economic development. These are all things that community desperately needed before the water crisis. And so, to me, it just makes sense to try and get this community out of the downward spiral that it has been in for generations.
Right, but that's a different conversation, I'd say. But a conversation they'll have to wait for another day. Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley, I greatly appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley here on the program. Yeah, early childhood education, all those things. Yeah, those are great conversation to have. I'm not sure it's directly related to the water situation, but it's directly related to how much money you're going to pay to fix the problem. I can guarantee you that. Back in a moment on the Steve Gruber Show.
This is Common Sense Radio. Straightforward and no excuses.
All right. Come on now.
This is the Steve Gruber Show.
Call me crazy.
Oh, yeah.
What I said was perfectly right and spot on accurate.
Boy's got a mouth like a cannon, always shooting it all.
Stop. Yeah, stop. I mean, you're way off script.
Got it in me. Gonna quit until it all comes out.
Hey, boy.
Been a long education.
Yeah, it's not cynical. It's common sense.
Pay attention to me when I'm talking to you.
I'm gonna rock the nation. Rock the nation.
Genuine, accountable, and raw. Here is Steve Gruber.
Welcome to it. It is Tuesday here on the program. Thanks for stopping in. Greatly appreciate your support and I appreciate you checking in. Right now, we're just trying to keep up on the developing story out of Brussels. Of course, a big terrorist attack there early today during rush hour, 8 o'clock local time, 3 o'clock Eastern time this morning. Bombs went off at the airport in Brussels. 80 minutes later, bombs went off on a subway train, bringing to a halt transportation around the European Union. The latest count, 28 dead, dozens injured. The body count still being evaluated. Some reports say 21 dead, some say 26, some say 28. 28 being the latest, but of course these things have a tendency to fluctuate. But it is the latest example of Islamic terrorism coming home to roost for the second time in Europe in the last few months. Of course, this after the leading suspect in the Paris attacks of last year was captured by Belgian police just in the last few days, captured alive. And he said he was planning and building a network to create further attacks. The police in Belgium not willing to say it's terrorism yet, but eyewitnesses say that they were hearing gunshots and men screaming in Arabic and then explosions. How's your math today? Mine's pretty good. How is yours? My math is pretty solid. It's just it's pretty startling to realize that there are people today that would call you xenophobic or Islamophobic for pointing out the obvious. It's not people running around, yelling in Amish, that are pulling off these attacks. All right, fair enough. Well, keep an eye on what's going on there and keep you up to speed. Meanwhile, I want to play some audio for you of a strange attack yesterday, and I'm not sure what to make of this. Has Bill Clinton gone off the reservation, or is it a preemptive attack on Barack Obama? Because Bill Clinton, while speaking to a political campaign gathering, a rally in Spokane, Washington yesterday, decided to lash out at the Obama administration and the president himself over the failure of the last many years of the Obama administration. It makes you wonder, okay, first of all, so that's why is he going after Obama because he's just kind of a little bit scattered? Or is he going after him because he knows something about what might be coming up on the FBI investigation into his wife? Clip one, let's listen to this. Clip one, go.
I literally, from the time I met her 45 years ago till we talked yesterday, she is the best change maker I have ever known. She always finds a way to make something good happen, to make people feel empowered, to buy people into the process, to make democracy work the way the framers intended for it to work. Now, if you don't believe we can all grow together again, if you don't believe we're ever going to grow again, if you believe it's more important to relitigate the past, there may be many reasons that you don't want to support her. But if you believe we can all rise together, if you believe we've finally come to the point where we can put the awful legacy of the last 8 years behind us and the 7 years before that when we were practicing trickle-down economics and no regulation in Washington, which is what caused the crash, then you should vote for her because she's the only person who basically has good ideas, will tell you how she's going to pay for them, can be commander-in-chief, and is a proven change maker with Republicans and Democrats and independents alike.
Mm-hmm. The awful legacy of the last 8 years and the 7 years before that, we got those turned around a little bit. But he goes after Barack Obama. He goes after George W. Bush. He attacks them both while his wife is excoriating this administration as well, an administration that she worked for, attacking the deal made with Iran, a deal that she helped in part to put together. You know, attacks this administration for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, something she worked in part on. It's a little baffling, to say the least. It's a little baffling, to say the least. Let's see here. Donald Trump outlined an unabashedly non-interventionist approach to world affairs yesterday, telling the Washington Post electoral and editorial board that he questions the need for NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was formed after World War II and has been the backbone of Western security policy since the Cold War erupted. The meeting at the Post covered a range of issues, including media libel laws, violence at his rallies, climate change, and the U.S. presence in Asia. Donald Trump, he said, I do think it's a different world today, and I don't think we should be nation building anymore. I think it's proven not to work, and we have a different country than we did. We have $19 trillion in debt. We're sitting probably on a bubble, and it's a bubble that if it breaks, it's going to be very nasty. I just think we have to rebuild our country. He went on to say, I have watched as we build schools in Iraq, and they're blown up. We build another one. We get blown up. We rebuild it 3 times, and yet we can't build a school in Brooklyn. We have no money for education because we can't build in our own country. At what point do you say, hey, we have to take care of ourselves? So I know the outer world exists, and I'll be very cognizant of that. But at the same time, our country is disintegrating, large sections of it, especially the inner cities. Pretty good stuff, I'd say. Takes you back to the Monroe Doctrine, which is why so many Republicans in the inner circle are, wait a second, we can't do that. Pull back from the war. Well, you know, he also questioned how many military bases we have around the world, something I've done for a long time. 186 military bases last time I checked around the world. Do we need 186 military bases when a kid with a big gulp in South Dakota can drive a drone right into the nose of a terrorist halfway around the world? And Trump also listed members of his foreign policy team, chaired by Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama. Others on the list include Keith Kellogg, Carter Page, Waleed Ferris, and Joseph Schmitz, all PhDs, by the way, all of them, each and every one of them. Waleed Ferris, PhD, advisor to the House of Representatives. Carter Page, PhD. George Papadopoulos, an oil and energy consultant. Joe Schmitz, Inspector General at the Department of Defense. General Keith Kellogg, and many, many more on the list. A bit interesting. A non-interventionist policy would be the plan from a Trump administration. What do you think of that? 888-900-9966. Back in a moment.
The Steve Gruber Show. American values with Midwestern common sense.
All right, welcome back to it. Our next guest here on the program, Michael Daugherty, my choice for president of the United States. And so I'm throwing his hat in the ring because he's not going to do it. So I'm going to do it for him. Michael Daugherty, welcome back.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good.
I'll take your check.
How are you? What's that?
I'll take your check.
Yeah, I knew you would. You'll take my donation to your campaign fund. I get that. Hey, I just want to ask you about something before we move on to the cybersecurity thing. So, is Bill Clinton all right?
They'll say anything, so I've got no idea. I mean, I don't know what happened. He had this complete lapse of total honesty, and he probably is seeking therapy right now.
Wasn't it great? Obama's administration has been awful. Wasn't it great? I just loved it. Did you not love it?
It was hilarious. It's just hilarious. It's like, but what are you going to do now? What's
it's out there.
Well, it is what it is. It was a moment of. It kind of makes me nervous though because it's a whole new platform the Clintons have never used before, which is just blunt honesty, and I hope he doesn't catch on.
Yeah, let's try something different, Hill. I'm just gonna walk out there and tell him the truth. What?
No way.
Yeah, I'm gonna tell him the truth. All right, so enough fun with that. And we'll keep you updated on this Brussels terrorist attack we're keeping an eye on as well. 28 dead, the last number here. All right, Michael Daugherty, the Department of Justice is now probing allegations that Tyversa lied, I can't believe this, to the FTC about data breaches and all this data escaping, which is hard to believe in this day and age. Tell me what's going on.
Well, it is a long, slow, and it will continue to be road to justice. The FBI went in and raided Tyversa on March 1st. There's been some commentary in the press and from inside people there. But what Tyversa did, and the reason it's such a huge story is because this is the type of people that the U.S. government relied upon to go after companies like me, is they would go in and take companies' files and organizations' files, and then they'd alter the metadata and lie about if they had spread. They actually would come in and take them and then misrepresent that they were all over the world. And the government, full of experts, and I'm lying there, they're not experts, would rely on this company. So it's I have to say this has taken 7 years. And one of the reasons.
So hold on, just let me understand this then. Tyversa, that the government relies on for truth and honesty, goes out, gets some sort of a data, then they adulterate the data, then they propagate the data around, and they totally falsify what's going on in an effort to what? Bolster their paychecks? There are all these threats out there, they get more money.
Right.
What's the motivation?
From what I understand, they actually don't propagate it. It's the fact that since they were working with the government and other things, they had all these IP addresses of known true identity thieves, and they would put those IP addresses into the files they had taken to make it look like they were there. Well, of course, if you went to those IP addresses, those files might be long gone, but since they were the IP addresses of known identity thieves and child pornographers, you would believe it, even though they have no real evidence. And they built this whole fear scheme so that corporations, which of course just have people that sign invoices, and are under huge regulatory pressure, would hire them at like $4.75 an hour. And so they'd make all this up, and they created all this fear and doubt and just cash the check and cash the check. In the meantime, the government believes this, and doesn't understand it's not real, doesn't verify it, asks for a list of companies that Tyversa's found 100 more consumers' names in and what they've taken. And then the FTC goes after those companies, mine being one of them. And this story is just starting to break. It's taken me years and years and years and years to show this is how a government behaves, because there's so much pushback within the government to hide these.
So you have to pick at it and pick at it and pick at it. Yeah, you have to keep pushing at it and prodding at it and picking at it, and finally you've gotten some chinks in the armor there. Just remember, the journey of 10,000 miles begins with a single footstep. Isn't that great? You love that.
Yes, and people thought no one thought I was crazy when I wrote my book, but no one, and myself included, would thought a million years would have resulted in a congressional investigation and reports and a whistleblower and Justice Department immunity. And and now this raid. I mean, what terrifies me is how the system is built to protect these people, because there's a lot of people that should lose their jobs or be fired and even go to jail that are involved in the federal government. They're just covering up because they're so stupid and lazy. They don't care.
Are you suggesting the government's insular, and then people don't get exposed? Yeah, just a little bit.
These people have criminal immunity once they sue you. I mean, this agency uses lawyers to go after people so they can use that immunity. I mean, the Federal Trade Commission is a mess, and everyone's known inside that they're nuts. But no, it's people have a hard time really believing this. So while all the facts have been there for a couple of years, it's interesting to me that it takes pictures of black cars outside of their building in a real raid for finally people to go, wow, you were making it up. And that's the thing. It's so unbelievable that people won't believe it till it gets proven, and that takes several years. In the meantime, other people are getting hurt badly.
You basically have to rub their noses in for them to take notice, is what you're saying.
I will be doing the rubbing. Trust me, the rubbing has just begun.
Well, yeah. Hopefully we get this wrapped up because it's just bigger
picture.
It's got to be hell on your social life.
I have a social life.
Yeah. Michael Daugherty, always a pleasure. And keep us informed. You're almost there. It's almost time for the big payoff.
I'm in California and I'm talking to you. What?
It's beautiful. Michael Daugherty, always a pleasure, my friend.
All right. Take care. Thanks, man.
There you have it. It's the Steve Gruber Show. Straight ahead, Senator Rick Jones. We're going to talk about pipelines under the Great Lakes carrying oil. How safe are they? And should you be concerned? We'll talk about it straight ahead on the Steve Gruber Show.
Taking a closer look at the stories that affect you most with a big dose of common sense.
All right, welcome back to it. Welcome back to it. From the Detroit News, Michigan is expected to take in more than 5,000 refugees this year. I bring this to your attention as I point to what's happening in Brussels, Belgium today. At least 28 dead, dozens and dozens more seriously injured, maimed from what's going on. But 5,000 refugees would be by far the highest number of refugees to be resettled in our state since 2002. And, of course, this comes amid renewed concerns and security on the latest effort in Congress to overhaul the resettlement program. Of course, Governor Snyder had said it's time to put it on hold at least for a period of time. And yet, I'm not sure that's happening. More than 5,000 refugees coming, and here's the problem. You see, if you stand up and say, wait a second, we'd like to put a pause on this, then you're called you're called a bigot, you're called xenophobic, you're called racist, all sorts of things. State Senator Rick Jones joining me now on the program, and Senator, I'm reading from this Detroit News article that I have here, indicating that the biggest number of refugees in well over a decade projected to come to Michigan this year, 5,100 refugees in Michigan. I thought we were putting a break on that program. What's going on with that?
Well, my understanding was we were putting a break on a program that brought in people from countries where we could not fully vet their background.
In this case, it's saying that those from Syria and Iraq will go through more stringent background checks, but certainly not prohibited or precluded from being part of these refugees coming into Michigan. And I can understand people's fears. I mean, we can look today at what's going on in Brussels, Belgium. At least 28 people dead from terrorist bombings today. And, of course, Brussels is not saying that it's terrorist-related, but witnesses saying that they heard men screaming Arabic while shooting, and then bombs started going off. I don't need, to do the short course. I can do the math on that. And people are concerned.
Well, and certainly I understand that, and I have long taken a stand that we have to be extremely careful taking refugees from a country of war that's not cooperative with us. You know, Syria certainly is more friendly to Russia than they are to us. They're not going to tell us if somebody that's coming in is a terrorist. So I want to be very careful, and anything I can do to make sure everybody is properly vetted before they come in.
Well, my question, what can a state senator do? What can our elected officials do? You and your colleagues in Lansing, what can you do to help us be safe? I mean, what can the governor do? What can you guys do to say we don't like what the governor's doing? If he's doing something you don't like, I'm not suggesting that, but you understand the question. What can our elected officials do at the state level in Lansing do to make sure that we do the best we can to keep out the bad elements?
Not nearly enough, because the federal government controls who comes in and where they go, and we don't have a lot of say-so. We can withhold money, but then we get accused of starving people. So it's a real problem, and we're going to have to make a change in November, or we're going to have more problems.
You know, it sounds like when I was a kid, we used to call this a racket. This would be a racket because people are getting paid all the way through the system. People are getting paid to bring the person in. People are getting paid to house the person, to feed the person, so on and so forth. People are making money on this deal as well. No, all the way through.
Oh, absolutely. I don't disagree with you. There's people making money all the way through, and anytime you have a government program, everybody's got their hand out.
All right. A couple other things I want to touch on while I've got you on the line. You're concerned about, I think it's pipeline number 7, if memory serves, that runs under the Straits of Mackinac. There are pipelines that run under the Great Lakes that carry oil and so forth. You think it's time for tougher guidelines, closer inspections to protect the Great Lakes? Well, what's on your mind?
Well, 40 million people are drinking Great Lakes water. That's their source for drinking water. And it's only going to increase in the future. You know, as we connect Genesee County and Flint, more people will be drinking water from Lake Huron. But why would we put a oil pipeline under the Great Lakes? It's the definition of insanity. Now, any breakage there will be a massive catastrophe, not just threatening drinking water, but all of the tourism, the fishing, everything we depend upon for our economy. And we absolutely have got to have that properly inspected. And if it doesn't meet federal standards, which I believe after 62 years it doesn't, then it needs to be shut down.
Now, you don't think it meets federal standards based on something you've been told, something you've read, something you know? How many pipelines are you concerned with? And if you don't have the pipelines under the water, how do you suggest, because people, experts, scientists say that pipelines are the safest way to move oil, safer than trucks, safer than trains. How would you move the oil?
Well, you know, dirty little secret, this oil coming from Canada, guess where it goes? Right back to Canada. It comes from Canada down south and cuts through Michigan and goes over to Sarnia. You know, it's not going down to Detroit where we're making gasoline out of it. It's just a shortcut for Canada. Well, a tiny little amount is bled off and fed to the Michigan market. I'm talking like 5%, and that is what they're using to scam us. This Canadian oil needs to stay in Ontario. They can run it with a pipeline. I don't have a problem with that. But it's a lot easier to clean up if it breaks over land instead of under the Great Lakes.
And your suggestion is if it's staying in Ontario anyway, it's just a shortcut, then it could stay in Ontario. Now, the people in America must benefit financially from having it cross their property, I would think.
Oh, sure. I'm certain that they pay a little fee, perhaps some property taxes on the amount of the pipeline or something that a township or county can claim. But, you know, we have to think about what would this do to the economy. There are three legs of the stool that hold up the Michigan economy: manufacturing, agriculture, and tourism. And this would be a horrible catastrophe to one leg. It would probably break it.
And I want to ask you about one other thing before we run out of time here today, and that is the policy position put out now by the State Board of Education when it comes to transgender students specifically, that basically parents can be cut out of the conversation. Students of any age, kindergarten and on up, any age, can choose whatever gender they want to follow, whatever pronoun they want to be called, whatever name they want to be called. And parents, if we stick to the suggestion from the State Board of Education, would have no input. I'll give you about 30 seconds on this one.
Well, I'm going to check on this today, and if it's true, it's absolutely ridiculous. Certainly, I don't want boys in the girls' bathroom. I don't want boys in the girls' shower. This is absolutely something that must be addressed. One of my schools has a situation, and they provide the student a separate, single bathroom, and that's the way to go.
Yeah, it seems that this policy recommendation, and anybody interested in this story can find it in the Detroit Free Press, on the Daily Caller, a variety of sources out there, and check with your local school district as well. Senator Rick Jones, we'll have you back on this conversation because it's a big one that has pushed some buttons out there for listeners today, but I appreciate your time.
Have a great day.
Senator Rick Jones on the Steve Gruber Show. We'll be right back.
Delivering Michigan common sense with a big dose of truth and honesty.
All right, it's Tuesday. Before we get to our next guest, we're going to get to the hotline. John is checking in Portage. If you'd like to do the same, 888-900-9966. John, welcome to the program.
Good morning.
What's on your mind?
Good morning. Well, it's very interesting. The same old politicians have no fear that people being brought into this country might be a threat. But they continue across the world to be an absolute threat, just as Donald Trump was concerned about. And from the standpoint of them making Donald Trump look more viable and more correct, that's a warning sign, again, that the people from that region of the world are a problem. And when you just bring them in, as the governor seems to want to do, it's not a good thing.
I appreciate your time, John. Thanks for checking in. The phone number here, 888-900-9966. 888-900-9966. I can see why people are concerned, that's for sure. And to call people that are concerned for their safety and the safety of their families or communities and themselves, to call them bigots and xenophobic is a bit of a stretch. Just to improve our system so we can figure out, who's coming in, get proper background checks, vet people properly. That's not bigoted at all. It's common sense. It's the way it's always been done. Why would we stop now? Especially when we just learned that more than 5,000 refugees will be calling Michigan home in 2016. Shifting gears back to the president's historic visit to Cuba. First time in 90 years, first time since Calvin Coolidge was president. An American president has stepped foot in Havana. Anna Quintana is the Heritage Foundation's Latin American expert. She's joining us on the program now. Anna, welcome back.
Hey, good morning.
So first of all, I was a little shocked that when the Air Force One touches down and comes to Havana, the president basically got snubbed. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. Nobody there of real importance to meet him. It's like, yeah, whatever. And it's like, wow, that had to be, humbling, I suppose.
Well, let me tell you, the people who were there meeting him, two of them were diplomats that were expelled from the United States about a decade ago for espionage. So that goes to show you who's there meeting him. And one of them is also the Cuban government's now chief negotiator in this whole normalization process. So you can clearly see why Cuba's been able to extort so much from the United States. I mean, we are sending people who come from a quasi-Peace Corps development background, and they're sending their top spies. So imagine that.
Yeah, so apparently you're not a big fan of what's going on with Cuba. And listen, there's also, a number of people in Cuba that are wanted for crimes, including murdering police officers in the United States, none of which has changed, none of which have been presented back to the U.S. Nothing has been done. The dissidents are arrested and cleaned up before Obama arrives, while he stands proudly in front of the big mural
Che Guevara
of Che Guevara.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like, really?
That would be the equivalent of the president going to Germany and finding a portrait of Hitler and standing in front of it. Because, look, I'm a first-generation Cuban-American. For us, Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, Raul Castro, those are our Hitlers, right? Those are the ones who have exterminated God knows how many tens of thousands of Cubans, displaced upwards of 2 million to the United States. So for the president to be doing this, right, it's absolutely reprehensible, especially considering, the fact that he's in Cuba a few days after Secretary Kerry labeled what's happening in the Middle East against Christians a genocide. And when you look at persecution against the Christians and religious community on the island, Christian Solidarity Worldwide has documented that from 2014 to 2015, it's increased tenfold. Last year alone, 100 churches were bulldozed by the Cuban government. This is not a government that's making any sort of, it's not a good partner, it's not a good faith partner in negotiations, and they're not making any sort of changes in behavior to prove that they're deserving of U.S. normalization.
So what do you think the right policy approach is to Cuba? Obviously, this is another. Let's call this for what this is. This is the president trying to create some sort of a legacy for himself. At least that's my impression. That's my opinion. And he has asked for nothing in return. Raul has demanded the return of Guantanamo Bay, which I suggested a year and a half ago in a column that I wrote. The president would offer Guantanamo Bay as some sort of a wedding present to the Castros. It hasn't happened yet, but I think it still could.
Well, we don't know if it's happened privately, right? We don't know if any sort of promises or guarantees are happening privately, because what we've seen, the guarantees and the concessions that have been given publicly, those are outrageous enough, right? If you look at these past 15 months, Cuba's been taken off the state sponsor of terrorism list. It's been upgraded in the trafficking in persons report. You have the White House lobbying Congress to lift the embargo, to prematurely lift the embargo. You have the White House not advocating for American citizens who had their property stolen from the Cuban government, which is the reason why the embargo was put into place. And then you have a president that's rendering this trade embargo virtually absolutely useless via executive action, all the while has asked zero from the Cuban government. Repression on the island has increased. The Cuban government kept that U.S. Hellfire missile that was accidentally shipped to Havana for over a year. The Cuban government is creating a refugee crisis by allowing masses, like tens of thousands of Cubans, last year it was 50,000, to leave Cuba to come to the United States to pressure America. So now I ask you, regardless of what side of the aisle anybody is on, how can somebody support this policy?
Well, it's unbelievable unless your basic policy beliefs are rooted in Marxism and communism and socialism. If your belief system is rooted there, which I would suggest based on a pile of evidence, Barack Obama's is, and otherwise you wouldn't. I would agree with you. I'll tell you what, I'll give you 30 seconds for the last word on it.
Well, look, I think what we're seeing, this is not a president that's focused on a legacy policy. This is a president that has a revisionist idea of what America's role in the world. And America, as a leader of the free world, should be championing the cause of freedom and promoting human rights whenever he can. And for the president to not do so is truly a dereliction of his duties.
Ana Quintana from the Heritage Foundation Latin America expert, thank you so much.
Thank you.
There you have it. It is 52 after the hour. We'll be back in a moment on the Steve Gruber Show.